Steve Harvey had been hosting Family Feud for over 12 years, and in that time he had witnessed countless moments of joy, surprise, and genuine human connection. But nothing could have prepared him for what would unfold on that Thursday afternoon in September 2024. What started as another typical taping would become one of the most powerful moments in game show history, a moment where entertainment television became a platform for standing up against hatred and defending the dignity of immigrant families. This is a story about courage, moral clarity, and why sometimes the most important thing you can do is draw a line in the sand and refuse to cross it. If you believe in standing up for what is right, make sure to like and subscribe to this channel, because what happened next will restore your faith in humanity. The Martinez family from Phoenix, Arizona stood on one side of the Family Feud stage, their faces beaming with excitement and nervous energy. Carlos Martinez, a third-generation Mexican-American who owned a successful landscaping business, had brought his wife Maria, their 2 adult children, and his elderly mother Esperanza. On the opposite side stood the Peterson family from suburban Atlanta, led by Richard Peterson, a 52-year-old corporate executive with a confident swagger that bordered on arrogance. The contrast between the two families was striking, not just in their backgrounds, but in the energy they brought to the stage. The Martinez family radiated warmth and genuine excitement, constantly encouraging each other with gentle touches and whispered words of support. The Peterson family, while outwardly polite, had a competitive edge that seemed to cross into something darker, something that would soon reveal itself in the most shocking way possible. Steve Harvey walked onto the stage with his characteristic charm, ready to deliver his opening remarks and get the game underway. He had reviewed both family introductions before the taping and was looking forward to what he assumed would be another entertaining episode. The Martinez family had a compelling story. Carlos had built his landscaping company from nothing, working 18-hour days to provide for his family while also supporting his widowed mother. His daughter Isabella was studying to become a pediatric nurse, and his son Miguel had recently been accepted into law school. Mrs. Esperanza Martinez, sitting in the family section, wore her Sunday best for the occasion, a beautiful embroidered blouse that she had brought with her when she immigrated to America 40 years earlier. She clutched a rosary in her weathered hands, her lips moving in silent prayer for her family and ex-2019's success. The first few rounds of the game proceeded normally, with both families displaying good sportsmanship and quick thinking. The Martinez family took an early lead, with Carlos demonstrating impressive knowledge of popular survey answers. His mother cheered loudly from her seat every time her son scored points, her face glowing with pride. Steve engaged with both families between rounds, asking about their backgrounds and interests, creating those moments of connection that had made Family Feud such an enduring success. But as the game progressed, Steve began to notice something troubling in Richard Peterson and ex-2019's demeanor. There was a sharpness to his comments, a barely concealed contempt whenever the Martinez family scored points. His smile never quite reached his eyes, and his body language suggested someone who was used to winning and did not handle competition gracefully. The tension that had been building beneath the surface finally erupted during the 4th round. The question on the board was simple and family-friendly, asking contestants to name something children look forward to at school. Carlos had just given an excellent answer, earning the Martinez family another substantial score and putting them within striking distance of winning the game. As the families prepared to switch positions for the next question, Richard Peterson leaned toward his own family members and made a comment that the microphones picked up clearly. His words, intended as a private joke to his family, were broadcast throughout the studio and captured on tape for posterity. What Richard Peterson said was unconscionable, a racist remark that suggested immigrant children looked forward to school primarily for free meals because their parents were too lazy to work and provide for them. The comment was delivered with a smirk, a casual cruelty that suggested this was how he regularly spoke when he thought cameras and consequences were not present. The studio audience gasped audibly, a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck the air out of the room. The Martinez family froze, their earlier joy and excitement replaced by shock and hurt. Isabella Martinez visibly recoiled, her hand flying to her mouth as tears instantly filled her eyes. Carlos wrapped a protective arm around his daughter, his face a mask of controlled anger and profound disappointment. But it was Mrs. Esperanza Martinez whose reaction cut the deepest. The elderly woman, who had worked as a seamstress for 30 years after immigrating to America, who had raised her children while learning English at night school, who had sacrificed everything to give her family a better life, simply bowed her head and wept silently. Steve Harvey stopped mid-stride. The smile that had been his trademark for decades vanished from his face, replaced by an expression of such righteous anger and moral clarity that everyone in the studio recognized they were witnessing something unprecedented. He slowly turned to face Richard Peterson, and in that moment, everything about Steve and X2019's demeanor changed. This was no longer a game show host managing a family-friendly competition. This was a man of principle confronting hatred and refusing to let it stand unchallenged. The studio fell completely silent. Even the production crew, who had seen Steve handle countless unexpected moments over the years, had never witnessed this particular transformation. Steve Harvey was known for his humor, his warmth, his ability to connect with contestants from all walks of life. But what was about to happen would reveal another dimension of his character entirely. Steve walked directly to Richard Peterson, stopping just a few feet away from the man who had just revealed his true nature on national television. His voice, when he finally spoke, was quiet but carried throughout the studio with perfect clarity. The microphones captured every word, every pause, every inflection of controlled fury and moral conviction that Steve channeled into his response. What he said next would be replayed millions of times, quoted in articles about racism and moral courage, and studied in communications classes as an example of how to confront hatred with both strength and dignity. And X201C, sir, I need you to repeat what you just said, and X201D. Steve began, his eyes locked on Richard Peterson with an intensity that made the other man visibly uncomfortable. And X201C, because I want to make absolutely certain that I heard you correctly. I want everyone in this studio and everyone watching at home to understand exactly what kind of person stands on this stage right now. And X201D, Richard Peterson and X2019's confident swagger evaporated. He stammered, suddenly aware that his private joke had become a public revelation of his character. He attempted to backtrack, to claim it was just humor, that people were too sensitive, that Steve was overreacting. Each excuse fell flatter than the last, each attempt to minimize what he had said only digging his hole deeper. Steve did not interrupt, allowing Richard to fully expose himself through his own words, giving him every opportunity to demonstrate that his initial comment was not an aberration, but a window into how he truly viewed immigrant families and their children. When Richard finally stopped talking, having exhausted his repertoire of excuses and justifications, Steve took a deep breath before responding. What he said next would become one of the most powerful moments in television history, a masterclass in how to confront racism while maintaining one and X2019's own dignity and honoring the dignity of those who had been attacked. And X201C, Mr. Peterson, I have been hosting this show for over a decade, and X201D, Steve said, his voice growing stronger with each word. And X201C, in that time I have met thousands of families from every background you can imagine. I have seen people from all over the world stand on this stage with hope in their eyes and love in their hearts. I have witnessed what the American dream actually looks like, not the fantasy version, but the real version, where people work multiple jobs, where parents sacrifice everything for their children, where families support each other through struggles that would break lesser people. And X201D. Steve gestured toward the Martinez family, who stood together in a tight group, supporting each other through this unexpected trauma. And X201C, the Martinez family represents everything that is good and decent about this country. Carlos started with nothing and built a successful business through hard work and determination. His mother, Mrs. Esperanza Martinez, came to this country 40 years ago and worked as a seamstress to support her family while learning a new language and adapting to a new culture. His children are pursuing careers in nursing and law, dedicated to serving their community and making the world better. They came here today to have fun, to celebrate their family, to compete in a game they have watched together for years. And you, sir, you decided to make a racist joke about immigrant children. And X201D, the silence in the studio was absolute. Even the camera operators had stopped their usual movements, everyone transfixed by the confrontation unfolding before them. Steve continued, his moral authority filling every corner of the space. And X201C, you want to know what immigrant children look forward to at school, Mr. Peterson? They look forward to proving people like you wrong. They look forward to learning, to achieving, to becoming doctors and lawyers and teachers and business owners. They look forward to making their parents proud, to honoring the sacrifices their families made to give them opportunities. They look forward to showing America that they belong here just as much as anyone else, that their dreams are just as valid, that their humanity is just as precious. And X201D, Steve and X2019, S voice grew even more powerful, resonating with the weight of personal experience and collective history. And X201C, my grandparents picked cotton in the South. They faced people who said they did not belong, who made jokes about them, who questioned their worth as human beings. I stand here today as the beneficiary of their struggle, their determination to prove that hatred and bigotry would not have the last word. The Martinez family has that same determination, that same dignity, that same refusal to let small-minded people define who they are. And X201D, Richard Peterson tried to interrupt to defend himself one more time, but Steve raised his hand in a gesture that commanded silence. And X201C, no, sir, you have said quite enough. In fact, you said everything we needed to hear about who you are and what you believe, but here is what you are going to hear from me right now. You are done on this show. You and your family are leaving this stage immediately. Family Feud is a celebration of families, of love, of community. We do not give a platform to racism, and we do not tolerate disrespect toward immigrant families or their children. And X201D. The studio audience erupted in applause, a standing ovation that continued for nearly a full minute. Through the applause, Steve turned to address the Martinez family directly, and what happened next would become the moment that people remembered most. Steve walked over to Mrs. Esperanza Martinez, who was still crying quietly, and knelt down beside her chair so that he was at her eye level. He took her weathered hands in his, and when he spoke to her, his voice was filled with such genuine respect and compassion that there was not a dry eye in the studio. And X201C, Mrs. Martinez, I need you to hear something very important, and X201D, Steve said gently. And X201C, what that man said has nothing to do with you, nothing to do with your family, and nothing to do with the truth. You are a hero. You left everything you knew to come to a new country and build a better life for your children. You worked hard, you raised good people, and you gave them the foundation to succeed. Your grandson is going to be a lawyer. Your granddaughter is going to be a nurse. They are going to help people, they are going to make a difference, and they learned how to do that from watching you. And X201D. Mrs. Martinez, who spoke limited English but understood every word through Steve and X2019's tone and respect, squeezed his hands and nodded through her tears. Steve continued, and X201C, I want you to know that everyone in this studio, everyone watching at home, everyone with a heart and a conscience, we see you. We honor you. We are grateful for people like you who make this country better, richer, more beautiful. You belong here. Your family belongs here. And no ignorant comment from a small person can ever change that truth. And X201D. The moment between Steve Harvey and Mrs. Esperanza Martinez transcended language, culture, and the artifice of television production. It was a pure human connection, a powerful elder showing respect to another elder, a son honoring someone in X2019's mother the way he would want his own mother honored. When Steve finally stood up, he turned to Carlos Martinez and offered his hand. Carlos shook it firmly, and Steve pulled him into a genuine embrace. And X201C, your mother is a queen, and X201D, Steve said simply. And X201C, and you honor her every day by the way you live your life and raise your children. And X201D. While this powerful exchange was occurring, security personnel had arrived to escort the Peterson family from the studio. Richard Peterson protested, insisting that Steve was overreacting, that this was political correctness run amok, that he had the right to make jokes without being censored. His complaints fell on deaf ears. The producers had made the decision instantly and unanimously. There would be no debate, no second chances, no opportunity for redemption in this moment. Racism had no place on the Family Feud stage, and the consequences were immediate and absolute. As the Peterson family departed, Steve addressed the studio audience and the cameras directly, making a statement that would be shared across every news outlet and social media platform within hours. And X201C, ladies and gentlemen, what you just witnessed is not entertainment. This is real life. Racism is real, and it shows up in comments that people think are funny, in jokes that demean and dehumanize, in casual cruelty directed at people who look different or speak with an accent or come from somewhere else. We have a choice in moments like this. We can look away. We can pretend it is not our problem. We can let it slide because confronting it is uncomfortable. Or we can stand up and say clearly and loudly that this is not acceptable, not now, not ever. And X201D. Steve and X2019. Impromptu speech continued, drawing on his own experiences and the broader history of discrimination in America. And X201, every immigrant family has a story of struggle and triumph. Every immigrant family has faced people who questioned whether they belonged, who made assumptions about their worth, who treated them as less than human. But here is what I know after all my years on this earth. Those families, those children who get mocked and dismissed and told they do not belong, many of them go on to achieve remarkable things. They become doctors who save lives, teachers who inspire students, entrepreneurs who create jobs, artists who enrich our culture. They contribute to this country in countless ways, and they do it while carrying the burden of knowing that some people will never see their full humanity. And X201D. The production team made a decision that was unprecedented in game show history. Rather than simply declaring the Martinez family the winners by default and moving on to another taping, they decided to give the family the full experience they had come for, but with a significant change. Steve announced that the Martinez family would compete in a special fast money round, not against another family, but simply to showcase their knowledge and win prize money. The family conferred briefly and agreed, though the joy that had animated them earlier was now mixed with the emotional weight of what they had just experienced. During the commercial break, Steve checked in with each member of the Martinez family individually, making sure they felt comfortable continuing. Isabella was still upset, her eyes red from crying, but she told Steve that she wanted to finish what they had started. Miguel, the law student, had a different perspective. And X201C, Mr. Harvey, my whole life I have dealt with people who make assumptions about me because of my last name or the color of my skin. My parents taught me to respond with excellence, to prove through my actions and achievements that their prejudice says nothing about me and everything about them. If we walk away now, that man wins. If we stay and succeed, we honor everything our grandmother sacrificed for us. And X201D. Steve was deeply moved by Miguel and X2019's maturity and wisdom. He shared the young man and X2019's comment with the producers, and they agreed to incorporate it into the episode when it aired. The decision to broadcast what had happened rather than burying it or editing it out was not made lightly. The producers consulted with Anthropic and X2019's legal team, considered the potential backlash, and ultimately decided that the educational and moral value of showing Steve and X2019's response to racism outweighed any commercial considerations. They would air the episode in its entirety, with appropriate context and framing, and use it as an opportunity to start a national conversation about discrimination and the immigrant experience. The fast money round proceeded with the Martinez family demonstrating impressive knowledge and teamwork. Carlos and Miguel went first, scoring a respectable 178 points. When it was time for Isabella to complete the round, Steve took a moment to speak with her before starting the clock. And X201C, sweetheart, I know today has been difficult, and X201D, he said gently. And X201C, you came here expecting fun and instead you encountered ugliness. But I want you to remember something. You are studying to be a pediatric nurse. You are going to spend your career taking care of children, including immigrant children, including children whose parents work multiple jobs and struggle to make ends meet. Those children need advocates like you, people who see their worth and fight for their well-being. What you do in the next few minutes does not define you, but how you respond to adversity over your lifetime, that is your true character. And X201D. Isabella nodded, wiping away fresh tears but standing straighter, her resolve strengthening. When Steve asked her the 5 fast money questions, she answered with confidence and clarity. Her answers were not all #1 responses, but they were solid, thoughtful, and scored enough points to bring the family and X2019's total well over the winning threshold. When the final board revealed that they had won, the celebration was bittersweet. They had achieved what they came to do, but the victory felt hollow in some ways, tainted by the hatred they had encountered along the way. Steve had one more surprise for the family. He announced that in addition to their game winnings, he personally would be donating an equal amount to a scholarship fund in Mrs. Esperanza Martinez and X2019's name, specifically designated for children of immigrant families pursuing careers in healthcare and law. The gesture was spontaneous, coming from Steve and X2019's own conviction that combating racism required not just words but concrete actions that created opportunity and honored the people who had been harmed. Mrs. Martinez, understanding the significance if not all the details, stood up and walked to Steve, embracing him while speaking rapidly in Spanish. Her daughter-in-law translated, and X201C, she says you are a blessing from God, that you defended her family when you did not have to, and that she will pray for you every day for the rest of her life. And X201D. The episode that eventually aired became one of the most watched in Family Feud history. The network made the decision to air it during prime time with a special introduction explaining the context and the serious nature of what viewers were about to witness. They included resources for viewers who wanted to learn more about combating racism and supporting immigrant families, and they donated commercial time to organizations working on immigrant rights and cultural understanding. The response was overwhelming and, as expected, divided. Millions praised Steve Harvey for his moral courage and clear stance against racism. Social media was flooded with messages of support, with people sharing their own experiences of discrimination and expressing gratitude for seeing someone with a platform use it to defend the vulnerable. Many immigrant families reached out directly to share how much it meant to see someone stand up for them on national television, to see their dignity defended in such a public way. Teachers reported using the episode in classrooms to discuss racism, moral courage, and the importance of being an upstander rather than a bystander. The Martinez family became unexpected symbols of grace and dignity in the face of hatred. They gave interviews where they emphasized that while Richard Peterson and X2019's comment had hurt them deeply, their focus was on moving forward and continuing to live their values. Carlos spoke eloquently about his mother and X2019's journey and the sacrifices she had made, saying that her life story was a more powerful refutation of racism than any words could be. Isabella discussed how the experience had strengthened her resolve to become a pediatric nurse who advocates for all children, regardless of their background. Miguel reflected on how witnessing Steve Harvey and X2019's response had reinforced his decision to pursue a legal career focused on civil rights and immigrant justice. Inevitably, there was also backlash. Some viewers accused Steve of being too harsh, of overreacting to what they characterized as simply a joke in poor taste. Some defended Richard Peterson and X2019's right to free speech and criticized what they saw as cancel culture. These responses revealed the deep divisions in American society around issues of race, immigration, and what constitutes acceptable discourse. Steve addressed the criticism directly in subsequent interviews, never wavering from his position. He pointed out that free speech does not mean freedom from consequences, that having a platform on a family television show is a privilege, not a right, and that some lines should never be crossed. He spoke about the responsibility that comes with having influence and a voice that reaches millions of people. The story continued to evolve in unexpected ways over the following months. Richard Peterson, after initially defending his comment, eventually issued a public apology, though many found it inadequate and insincere. He claimed he had grown up in a different time with different values, but recognized that his words were hurtful and wrong. Whether this represented genuine growth or damage control remained debatable. His employer, a major corporation, placed him on administrative leave pending an investigation into whether his expressed views violated company policies on diversity and inclusion. The controversy ultimately cost him his executive position, though he maintained that he was being unfairly punished for a momentary lapse in judgment. The scholarship fund that Steve Harvey established in Mrs. Esperanza Martinez and X2019's name grew substantially as other donors contributed. Within the first year, it provided full scholarships to 12 students from immigrant families pursuing healthcare and legal careers. Each scholarship recipient was invited to meet Mrs. Martinez, creating powerful intergenerational connections between someone who represented the immigrant experience of the past and young people who represented its future. These meetings were often emotional, with scholarship recipients expressing gratitude not just for the financial support, but for the validation that their dreams mattered, that their families and X2019 sacrifices were recognized, and that people with resources and influence believed in their potential. Steve Harvey himself reflected on the incident in his annual Christmas special, devoting a segment to what he called the most important moment of his career. He spoke about how easy it would have been to let Richard Peterson and X2019's comments slide to avoid controversy, to keep the taping moving and deal with it behind the scenes. But he explained that in that moment, looking at Mrs. Martinez and X2019's tears, Seeing the pain in the Martinez children and ex-2019's eyes, he knew that silence would be complicity. He knew that every immigrant family watching needed to see someone stand up and declare that their humanity mattered, that attacks on them would not go unanswered, that they had allies and advocates. Family Feud itself experienced a surge in applications from immigrant families and families of color, who saw the show as a place where they would be treated with dignity and respect. The producers implemented new training for staff on cultural sensitivity and created protocols for handling incidents of discrimination should they occur in the future. They also began featuring more diverse families in their programming, telling a wider range of American stories and showcasing the beautiful complexity of the nation and ex-2019's multicultural reality. The show became known not just as family entertainment, but as a platform that celebrated diversity and stood firmly against hatred. 3 years after the incident, the Martinez family was invited back to Family Feud for a special anniversary episode. Mrs. Esperanza Martinez, now in her 80s but still vibrant and strong, wore the same embroidered blouse she had worn during their first appearance. The family shared updates on their lives. Isabella had graduated from nursing school and was working in a pediatric intensive care unit, where she was known for her particular skill in working with families who spoke limited English. Miguel had completed his law degree and was clerking for a federal judge who specialized in immigration cases. Carlos and ex-2019's landscaping business had expanded, and he had made it a priority to hire immigrant workers and pay them fair wages with full benefits, modeling the kind of employer he wished all immigrant workers could have. Steve welcomed them back with genuine warmth and affection, and the episode became a celebration of resilience, dignity, and the triumph of good over hatred. The most moving moment came when Mrs. Martinez, speaking through her granddaughter and ex-2019's translation, addressed Steve directly. She told him that what he had done 3 years earlier had changed her family and ex-2019's life in ways that went beyond scholarships or publicity. She said that he had given them the gift of feeling truly seen and valued, that his defense of their dignity had healed wounds they did not even know they carried. She told him that immigrant families across the country spoke his name with reverence, that he had become a symbol of what it meant to use your platform for good, and that his moral courage had inspired countless others to speak up against injustice when they witnessed it. Steve, rarely at a loss for words, was visibly emotional as he listened to Mrs. Martinez and ex-2019's message. When she finished, he embraced her again, and the image of the two of them, representing different journeys and backgrounds, but united in their commitment to dignity and justice, became another iconic moment. Steve told her that she and her family had taught him just as much as he had taught them, that their grace in the face of hatred had reminded him why his work mattered, and that he would continue to use his platform to defend families like hers as long as he had breath in his body. The story of what happened on that Thursday afternoon in September 2024 became part of American cultural history, referenced in discussions about racism, moral leadership, and the power of taking a stand. It was studied in schools, discussed in churches, debated in university classrooms, and shared in living rooms across the country. For some, it represented everything right about holding people accountable for racist speech. For others, it sparked conversations about grace, redemption, and whether one comment should define a person and ex-2019's entire life. These conversations, difficult and uncomfortable as they often were, represented the kind of dialogue that can lead to understanding and growth. Steve Harvey and ex-2019's decision to kick Richard Peterson off the Family Feud stay that day was not complicated or difficult. It was the natural response of a man with clear values who refused to compromise those values for the sake of convenience or commercial considerations. It was the response of someone who understood that silence in the face of hatred is its own kind of participation, that platforms come with responsibilities, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is draw a clear line and defend it absolutely. The fact that this simple act of moral clarity became such a significant cultural moment speaks to how rarely we see such clear stands taken in public spaces, and how hungry people are for leadership that puts human dignity above all other considerations. As this remarkable story comes to a close, the ultimate lesson is both simple and profound. Racism thrives in silence, in the gaps where good people say nothing, in the moments when cruelty goes unchallenged. But it withers in the light, when someone with a voice uses it to declare that every human being deserves dignity, that immigrant families contribute immeasurably to the fabric of our society, and that there is no place for hatred in spaces meant to celebrate family and community. Steve Harvey used his voice that day, and in doing so, he honored not just the Martinez family, but every family that has ever faced discrimination, every child who has ever been mocked for their accent or their background, every person who has ever wondered if they truly belong in this country they call home. The Martinez family returned to Phoenix forever changed by their experience, carrying both the wound of what Richard Peterson had said and the healing balm of Steve Harvey and X 2019's fierce defense of their dignity. Mrs. Esperanza Martinez kept a framed photograph from the episode in her living room, showing Steve kneeling beside her, holding her hands. She would tell visitors that the photograph represented the moment she knew that her sacrifice, her years of hard work, her decision to leave everything familiar and build a new life in a new country, all of it had been worth it. Because she had raised a family that stood tall in the face of hatred, and because good people had stood with them when it mattered most. If this story moved you, if you believe in standing up for what is right, make sure to like and subscribe, because these are the stories that remind us of our shared humanity and our responsibility to defend the dignity of every person.